This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a website or domain, go to squarespace.com/microphone nerds for 10% off your first purchase. This video has been a long time coming. It took me a heck of a long time to find one, but I have a Lumix GM5. I searched high and low in Tokyo recently. I felt like I went in every single shop in Tokyo that sold cameras, and I found one in the very last shop on the very top floor. This is the Lumix GM5, and it is probably the most premium tiny camera ever made, and the most premium tiny camera that Lumix have ever made specifically. I was under the impression that it was basically just a Lumix GM1 but with an EVF, but there's so much more to it than that. There's so many more bells and whistles and tweaks. And while the GM1 is the smallest Micro Four Thirds camera ever made, it is a little bit plastic and light, and there are a few corners cut with it comparatively to the GM5. Look at how beautiful and tiny it is, and look at all the premium dials and buttons. My goodness. So the first thing that I noticed when I picked up this camera is the top section of it is metal build quality, and the bottom is very robust plastic. The dials on the top are metal, so the main two dials here are solid metal and really tactile and high quality. And on the back of some Lumix cameras, you do get this sort of spinny plastic dial of doom, and that's one of the things that you need to sort of spin in order to change your aperture or your shutter speed, for example. I much prefer the more premium way that some of the other cameras do it, where it's a physical D-pad basically, and all the buttons are really premium as well. And most importantly, we've got a back dial here for your thumb. So no more spinning the wheel of chaos. We can actually just change our settings like adults on this camera, even though it's blooming tiny. Of course, one of the main selling points of the Lumix GM5 is the electronic viewfinder. It's very hard to come by a camera this small that has one. And there's a full working hot shoe as well. And as you can see, it doesn't make the camera any bigger. Other more recent Lumix cameras possibly should have looked to this camera for some advice and inspiration, to be honest. And this is no shade to my beloved GM1, my little blue machine, by the way. It's a treasure of my tiny camera collection, one of my all-time favourites. But you do feel a little bit of a sacrifice here and there when you're out and about using it. Particularly the back spinny dial of doom, as I've mentioned, and having a camera that is so small without an electronic viewfinder and without a flippy screen does make composing quite a challenge in certain lighting situations. So having an EVF on the GM5 has been worth its weight in gold. There is no flippy screen, which is a sacrifice, but I just think for the tiny form factor, give me the EVF any day, it's great. Speaking of the EVF, don't expect miracles if you want to pick up a GM5. Yes, there is an electronic viewfinder. It works as intended. You can look through it, you can compose, it's great. But it's very low quality, to be honest. It's like looking at a postage stamp down a long corridor. It's very tiny and quite dark compared to some other EVFs that I've used. However, it gets the job done. And by the by, if you want to watch my full vlogging day in Tokyo, where I'm out and about impulse buying tiny cameras, I've got that video online as an exclusive to my mailing list squad, and there's loads of fun things like photo contests, exclusive videos, etc. There's a link in the description. So I've been out in the Faroe Islands now for almost 10 days, and I've been using the GM5 as my everyday carry, with a caveat of when it's not raining. And it's been raining quite a bit. But on the times when it is dry, I've been taking this out. I've just been having it on this lovely little green strap, and it's been very light to carry when we've been doing walks, and very sort of incognito, and it doesn't get in the way. So mentioning rain, there is no weather sealing in this. That would just be the icing on the cake, wouldn't it, to have something this small and feature packed? But yeah, that's probably asking for too much. So there is no weather sealing, unfortunately. And there is also no IBIS. So I've been using some primes, but I've also been using my stock lens, my 12-60, 2.8 to f4, which is stabilized. So when I've had that on, I've got some video clips with it. The video features are nothing to write home about, but if you have a stabilized lens, they are more than usable. With the video features in mind, There is one major annoyance with this camera, and that is where the video button is placed. It's right underneath your blooming thumb. So when I pick this up and try to shoot sort of portrait, my thumb lands exactly where the record button is. You can turn this button off altogether in the menu. It's almost like Lumix designed it and then realized it was a problem and then thought there'd be a nice workaround. But I do quite like having instant access to some quick video snippets here and there. I put up with it, even though I've got several clips like this, where whenever I turn the camera vertically, I've just recorded a second of video. If you've got bigger hands than me, maybe disable this button, because it's a pain in the backside. Also quite interesting to note, and quite poignant in recent sort of discussions within the photography community with new camera releases, the tiny GM5 has a mechanical shutter. It has a mechanical shutter up to 1/500th of a second, and then after that you get electronic shutter. Walking around with this while it weighs nothing and it's comfortable in the hand and all the buttons feel really premium, and you've got that lovely little clack when you take a photograph. It is so nice. It's just like, oh, beautiful. There is something tactile about using this camera that just makes it a joy to use. You know, sometimes when you pick up a camera and it might tick all the blooming boxes in the world, but it just feels a bit boring and a bit sterile. This is the opposite of that. It's got tons of character. It's very nice in the hand, and it feels really nice to use and sounds really nice to use as well. I think while electronic shutter does have its place, and obviously it can help to bring the form factor down of larger sensor cameras, shooting with an electronic shutter feels quite soulless to me. I like a click. I like that feedback. I like to know that something's been captured and exactly when it's been captured. So I love the mechanical shutter in this. I love the sound and the feel when you press the shutter button. Everything just feels really premium and lovely, and it brings a smile to my face whenever I use it. Another interesting benefit, which is always welcome, is you have a full-sized SD card in here alongside the teeny tiny battery. Now the GM1 has a full-size SD slot, but some cameras in the Lumix lineup, like the GX800 for example, which I do love, only have a micro SD slot. So I really value having the full-size SD slot. And even though the battery is quite slim and tiny, it's not been terrible. You can turn down the brightness of the screen on the back, which is a full touch screen by the way. And if you use the EVF more than not, you can turn the brightness of the screen down and get some battery life back that way. But for everyday carry circumstances where you're just turning it off and on throughout the day, it's been absolutely fine. Now, I'll be the first to say, I don't think Lumix have a track record for making the sexiest cameras in the world. They're a little bit pragmatic, aren't they? And they all look relatively similar after a while. But I have to say that I think the GM5 is a delightful looking camera. And I know that's not the most important thing in the world. My usual everyday carry is the Lumix GX8, which I've spray painted, and it's hideous. It's just ridiculous. So, you know, looks are not my main sort of draw when it comes to an everyday carry, but this is, you know, giving the Fujifilms a run for the money. Absolutely stunning. I don't even usually like black cameras. I don't really like the more boring colours, as you probably know on this channel. It's really growing on me. I think the black on black with the black prime lens is super premium looking and really cool. Top tip for if anyone does want to buy cameras from Japan: some cameras you can just change the menu and it's fine. Some are like this, where you have to do a little bit of a workaround. So when I turn mine off, I get the exclamation mark of doom. That's because it's in service mode now and forever. I've got a blog post on my website that'll give you a walkthrough for models like the GM5, the GM1, the GF7. So if you want to import a camera on the cheap, or perhaps you're going to Tokyo or Japan and you want to get one and you're worried about the language barrier, you can convert them back to English just fine. So I've been using Squarespace for around a decade at this point. I built my wedding photography and videography business using a Squarespace website, and now I pretty much run this YouTube business using my Squarespace website. And never in any of those years have I ever had to know anything complex about website building. Everything is drag and drop, it's incredibly user-friendly, and I've always had great support from customer service as well. There's a brand new feature called Blueprint AI, where you can just in a few clicks create a completely unique
unique professional template in your style. So if you want to make a photography portfolio in a corner of the internet that is completely your own, Squarespace is the perfect place to do it. So check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, check out squarespace.com/microphonenerds for 10% off your first purchase. And thank you so much for listening to this little segment. Using the links that I post in my description really does help support the channel and keep the lights on around here. So if you do want a website, make sure to use the links below, and thank you as ever for your support.
Thought that I keep coming back to with the GM5 is there just isn't really a compromise. You know, sometimes if you're using sort of a smaller camera, you won't have the EVF, you won't have tactile buttons, you won't have this lovely back dial that I keep talking about and loving so much. There's always a sort of payoff because you're getting a lot of features into a smaller camera. But with the GM5, it doesn't feel like there is a drawback. It all feels like it's well designed, everything's in the right place, and it just feels a joy to use with very little compromise. Okay, it all sounds pretty good up to now, right? But we have some downsides, ladies and gentlemen. This camera is almost exactly 10 years old. This could be the 10-year anniversary video. It came out in November 2014. And it was quite a niche camera to begin with. This is a high-end premium product. It came out at $899 back then. So even though now we might look at it and think, you know, this is a fun, more budget, everyday carry camera, back in the day, this was a top of the line. So with that and its age, the consequences are that the used market is drying up, unfortunately. You can still find them, but I do think, sadly, at some point soon they are going to be very, very hard to come by. I say if you find one of these under 400 quid, buy it and be happy. You know, 350 is better. Anything less than 350 is an absolute steal. Send me the link, I'll buy it. I genuinely want to panic buy another one because I'm really sad if I ever get this broken, which I almost nearly did, by the way, because I've got this on it. I accidentally tangled my leg in it in the car and booted it out of the car. There's just a little scratch on the battery door, but otherwise it's been fine. So first-hand experience, very robust. But yeah, seriously, I think I love this so much. It has become my new favourite. I think I'm putting my Lumix GX8 back on the shelf, except for in rainy days, because that is weather sealed and this isn't. And I think the GM5 has stolen my heart. I do. I think it's my favourite tiny camera ever. Even in not a fun colour, that's how cool this is. You can get them in fun colours. There are a few, I think there's a green and a red, but the black's pretty nice as well. And given the state of the used market, we've got to get what we find at the end of the day. So dear Lumix, I feel like I'm doing this at the end of every video at the moment, but what I would not give to have an updated GM5. I think this is just the pinnacle of everyday carry, and it's just come back around now to be so popular. Street photography, travel, family, friends, everything. It's just perfect for those sorts of intimate everyday moments. And I just think, wouldn't it be great, you know, 10 years on, update the blooming thing. So if you find the GM5 a little bit too expensive or a little bit too hard to come by, check out my other videos in the tiny camera series. I have the Lumix GM1 and also the Lumix GX800, plus a plethora of more on a playlist on my channel. Check it out next.